All right. Good afternoon, everyone. So today we're going to walk in on Sri Ramakrishna, actually on a boat, practicing the Lakshmi Puja, or the Lakshmi worship. And he's sharing some beautiful things about the love of God and the nature of spiritual practice, the nature of religion, really. You know, more and more, I really don't like that word religion. It alienates me more every time I say it, it feels like. It's just the natural course of life, you know, that person paying attention to the experience of being, to the experience of living. That is religion, to see things honestly and to see things clearly and to learn accordingly and let go as you need to from the lessons that you learn. So he's talking today about an attitude of lovers of God, and I'm going to go back and read just one paragraph that apparently may have been read last week, where Sri Ramakrishna says, "Do you know how a lover of God feels? His attitude is, 'O God, you are the master, and I am your servant,' or 'You are the mother, and I am your child,' or again, 'You are my father and mother. You are the whole, and I am the part.' He does not like to say, 'I am Brahman,' or 'I am that idea of being God, which is quite easily misunderstood. He goes on, he says, the yogi seeks to realize the Paramatman, the supreme soul. That is the soul that's in all things, the soul of unity. His ideal is the union of the embodied soul, that soul which has your name, my name on it, the union of this embodied soul with the supreme soul. He withdraws his mind from sense objects and tries to concentrate it on the Paramatman. Therefore, during the first stage of his spiritual discipline, he retires into solitude and with undivided attention practices meditation in a fixed posture." So this idea, he says, that the yogi wants this union to not be this separate entity from the greater universe, which gives birth to pain and anxiety and insecurity and stress and all of those things. He wants to know that oneness, how he is in a perfect relationship with everything around him, to the point of absolute union, which is something that really can't be conceived of in the mind, that one without a second, this Advaitic Vedanta. So the path to that, the master is saying, he says, do you know how a lover of God feels? It's taking relationship. So we begin with relationship with the world around us, with the people around us, with each other. And we begin to try and withdraw our mind. And what does it mean to withdraw our mind? Don't give mind time. You know, like in the computer lab, you can sign up for a certain amount of time on the mainframe if you need to solve a problem. And so you give your problem, submit your program, the computer runs its thing, and then it's the next person's turn. Our mind is very much the same thing. It sits there. You know, it sits in resting. And really, I think, well, it sits in resting. And to use it, to engage it, we should try to resist from engaging it in thinking or processing things about the senses, about the things that we perceive as being separate from us. So those beautiful smells, the beautiful people walking around, the great restaurants, all those things are there, but we need to gather our mind in from those things, not contemplate those things, not spend our time thinking about those things. Why? Because those things are the things that draw us into the separate, draw us into the division, draw us into the idea of ourself being separate and apart from the whole. And he's saying, so the yogi in the beginning, who wants to understand his union with the universe, wants to understand the truth of what this experience of life is, what the experience of being is, the first step is to withdraw the mind from sense objects and center it on that unchanging source within. Now, for many of us, that's a difficult thing to do because we haven't spent much time with a quiet mind. we haven't spent much time separating our mind out from the world of the senses, from the changing world, with all of its colors and flashes. It draws our attention all the time, and we're quite content to live in that distraction. But we know from the teaching of the sages and the experience of practitioners that within us lies a silent, complete, content, tranquil, unchanging self. That part of us that has been looking through our eyes through our whole life. And this is central to the experience of being. That's something that has been listening to our ears and watching our mind and observing the changing world from an unchanging place. And so instead of spending our mind time by chasing after the changing world, being infatuated with all of the glitter and glam of it, we withdraw and put our emphasis on this unchanging observer who's watching all of this in the world, who's seeing all of the senses and all of this change. He says, his ideal is the union of this embodied soul and the Supreme Soul. He withdraws his mind from sense objects and tries to concentrate it on the Paramatman, that is, this one indivisible, unchanging, Supreme Self. Therefore, during the first stage of his spiritual discipline, he retires into solitude and with undivided attention practices meditation in a fixed posture. We get a really important hint here from Sri Ramakrishna. One is that it's only at the beginning that you have to separate yourself out, that you have to draw a boundary and say, I'm not going to go out and do all of those things and get involved in all of that. I'm going to withdraw to a quiet place and put my attention on this undivided universal self, whose nature is love and intelligence and being. And he makes the point of saying that this is a beginning stage. So it's important to us as religious folks going to church, going to temple, going to wherever we're going, to learn of God, to understand that this perspective of other, that we need to draw. I can't hang out with that person because they're not a good influence, or I don't hang out with that person because I don't agree with their thoughts or their philosophies or their religions. That's a junior state. That's not the ideal of religion. That's not what mature religion looks like. That's what toddler religion is. We take that time to grow up inside by establishing ourselves in this unchanging, ever free, ever pure, ever blissful self, to become aware of the gifts of being that are inherent to us, our bliss, our intelligence, our unchanging nature, the immortality of it, the fact that it's separate and apart from this cause, time, space, and causation. So when we become established in that space, it's like what Thakur says. He says, that when a plant is young, when a tree is young, you have to put a fence around it so that the deer don't eat it and strip it down to the ground and kill it. But after you've put that fence around it and that tree gets its established self and it grows up and the deer can no longer reach all the branches, well, then you can take that fence away and you can tie an elephant to the tree and it's not going to kill the tree. That's mature religion. That's mature religion. That's mature spirituality. When you don't have to be so careful about who you're mixing with and who you're talking to and this, that, and the other, all these ideals of purity, but that those are at the beginning, but fundamentally important, because you can't just walk into a baseball diamond and be a major league player all of a sudden. You have to go through this period of training. You have to allow yourself to be a toddler, even in religion, for a while. And so he's saying this, that in the beginning we withdraw from the world. Now, unfortunately, about 99% of religion is the beginning. So, we might be able to enjoy about 10 minutes of mature religion before we realize God. The other 9 million years that we've been going through can be counted as beginning for us. He says, so he withdraws in the beginning into solitude with undivided attention and practices meditation in a fixed posture. But the reality is one and the same. The difference is only in name. He who is Brahman is verily Atman, and again, he is the Bhagavan. He is the Brahman to the followers of the path of knowledge, the Paramatman to the yogis, and the Bhagavan to the lovers of God. And so he's stressing that even though we know in the beginning that we're separating ourselves out, and we are concentrating on this inner self, this unchanging self, that we should take this knowledge of the unity of all things, that the fact of the universe is that it's one without a second. It's not broken up into a multiplicity, into a diversity. There is a unity behind it that can't be seen by the person convinced that he or she or it is separate and apart from the whole. And so this can only be done through this practice of finding, first of all, finding that place inside that's unchanging, that's ever free and ever blissful. And once you've managed to touch it at some point, or at least to have developed a strong suspicion that it's there, the work is to learn to sit there and not be able to be pulled out. So you're in that calm self, you go to work, and that horrible person you work with comes up and immediately starts poking their finger at you and listing out your faults and yelling at you. If you're established in this inner self, you can see that person, you can hear them, you can talk to them, you can work it through, but you remain established in this unchanging self. That's your strength. This is that nature of the beloved, that constant presence of God, are all ways of talking about the existence of this place within, where the attention is on spirit, on soul, and on that unity. And so that person can go on, they can be as they can try and give you as many gifts of anger and frustration and insult as possible, but you being established can hear it and know it has nothing to do with you. There is no separateness, there's only unity. And in that established place you hear, and the mind and body reacts, but you continue to observe. The steamer had been, now remember they're on a boat on this Lakshmi worship day. So the steamer had been going toward Calcutta, but the passengers, with their eyes fixed on the master and their ears given to his nectar-like words, were oblivious of its motion. Dakshineshwar, with its temple and gardens, was left behind. The paddles of the boat churned the waters of the Ganges with a murmuring sound. But the devotees were indifferent to all of this. Spellbound, they looked on a great yogi, his face lighted with a divine smile, his countenance radiating love, his eyes sparkling with joy, a man who has renounced all for God and who know nothing but God. Unceasing words of wisdom flowed from his lips. This is beautiful. Do you see what M is doing here? M is painting a practical picture of what he's just instructed us to do, what the instructions he's heard from the Master about being established in that self and focusing entirely on that unchanging whole nature within. He describes it here. So even though the boat's leaving Calcutta behind, and all these people are sitting on the boat, he says that their eyes are fixed on the Master. So in that meditation that this yogi is practicing at the beginning, he sits in that posture, that straight, comfortable posture, and he's seeing only the eyes of the Master within, the eyes of your image of God from which you've been created, that you are an expression of, that divine self, if you don't want the words God in there. So he talks about this, and he shows us what it means. So they're on this boat, they're going along, they're not worried, they're not paying attention as they're drifting down the shore, they're not seeing the different temples that they're passing and who's, fishing and who's bathing. Their eyes are fixed on the Master. And he says that the Dakshineshwar with its temples and gardens are left behind. The paddles of the boat were churning in the water with a murmuring sound. But the devotees were indifferent to all of this. Why? Because they were spellbound. Looking on the great yogi, his face lighted with a divine smile, his countenance radiating love, his eyes sparkling with joy, a man who has renounced all for God. A man who has renounced all for God and knows nothing but God. Unceasing words of wisdom flow from his lips. And this is a description of that meditation. This is a description of being in the presence of that divine the divine presence within, that soul, that as long as we believe ourselves to be the personality with a name, the personality with a gender and a body and an age and, and all of these things that are always changing and really ultimately mean nothing, as long as we're identified with those, God is a presence separate from that. And our beginning efforts is to find and sit in the presence of that divinity inside, knowing that the ultimate truth is that it is our own self, that's our own being. And that we sit in the presence of this divine self with our Advaitic knowledge, that knowledge of oneness rolled in the corner of our dhoti, like Thakur says, Sri Ramakrishna says, and we enjoy God. We become spellbound with this beautiful image of the divine inside, our highest ideal of love, our highest ideal of intelligence, and the very experience of existence comes to the foreground with all of its wonder, with all of its inexplicable occurrence. So you see how M has just turned this around and showed us how the world is a manifestation of this very practice, and what it is to live in this world, being on a boat, being in the market, being at the mall, wherever you are, to be established in this inner space. And what are you doing in this inner space? You're spellbound in the vision of the beloved, that you're seeing not only within, but which everything without is indicating and pointing to. The Master begins speaking. The Gyanis, the practitioners of the path of knowledge, the Gyanis who adhere to the non-dualistic philosophy of Vedanta, say that the acts of creation, preservation, and destruction, the universe itself, and all of its living beings, are the manifestations of Shakti, the divine power. If you reason it out, you will realize that all of these are as illusory as a dream. Brahman alone is the reality, and all else is unreal. Even this very Shakti is insubstantial, like a dream. And he keeps saying that, that idea of a dream is very prominent when the sages talk about this non-duality. And it's because it's the most rich experience of the truth that we can have. I used to wonder as a kid what dreams were for. It's like, what is that about? And actually, there's lots of studies of people wondering the same thing. But doesn't it seem obvious at this point that the nature of the dream shows us firsthand how we can experience a world that is utterly convincing, how we can live in a world that is absolutely real? How can I say that this is unreal? And the dream demonstrates to you that yes, you can. You can live in a world that you are absolutely convinced to be real, that you can live in situations that are stressful or pleasant, beautiful or hideous, unable to see any possible way in which they can be unreal, and yet know that they are utterly unreal. You, the divine self, asleep in a bed, are experiencing a whole world that's essence is only your mind stuff, only your imagination, only the dance and play of the mind. And Sri Ramakrishna says in many places, everything is mind. He says that the Gyanis, they understand this, they reason it out. He says, if you look closely, everything is illusory as a dream. Brahman alone is the reality, and all else is unreal. Even this very Shakti is insubstantial, like a dream. And of course, immediately I want to go into my favorite thing to talk about and think about. But I do it all the time, so I'll just hint at it. That notion that we don't live in a world, we live in a mind, right? My favorite thing is the looking at a light and saying that light that I'm looking at right there, I'm not actually seeing that. That light's not getting to my brain. My brain does not see light at all. It's in a black box. It's in the dark. It's always been in the dark. What it's looking at is the encoding, nerve encodings that are being fed to it that it's interpreting and has created a symbol for light that looks like that to me. When you look at that light, I have no idea what you see. And I will never know what you will see. And you can be looking at something and seeing something radically different from my symbol of light, but we'll describe it in the same way. We'll talk about it because it's a symbol. And so we'll think we're in complete agreement, but you're looking at some bizarre, symbol that's completely different from my own. So he's just saying that. He's making this point here. If you reason it out, if you sit down and control the wandering mind, if you stop being fascinated by all of this external change and all of its unlimited number of combinations, and you come to that quiet self, and you learn to use your mind as a focused, concentrated instrument of realization, of understanding, that these truths, which seem so far-fetched when you hear about them in a lecture, become palpably real, because you begin to understand that you've been duped by the movie screen. You haven't realized that it's just moving still images on a blank screen. But though you reason all your life, unless you are established in samadhi, you cannot go beyond the jurisdiction of Shakti. Yes. So even if you reason, you'll understand, you'll grow in your knowledge, but that ego self, that sense of I, doesn't disappear until samadhi, until that final realization. So this nagging idea of little me is going to be there till the end. Don't be disturbed by that. Don't feel like you're failing because of that. Use that to enjoy the company of God. Use that to enjoy the taste of sugar, as opposed to being sugar. Even when you say, I am meditating or I am contemplating, still you are moving in the realm of Shakti, within its power. Right? Why? Because if there's an I who's experiencing, there's not unity. There's a separation there. So any time that you use the word I, which is why when Sri Ramakrishna talks, I don't know if it's never, but certainly very rarely will you ever hear him say the word I. He always talks about this, the pillowcase, this place. He always talks about his personality self, his ego self, in third person. Always careful to train his mind to know that's not me. That does not define me. And so he maintains that separation, that distance in there, so that he doesn't get pulled out of his established tranquil space within, that unchanging reality of who and what he is. This Brahman and Shakti, so God and his power, they are identical. If you accept one, you must accept the other. It's like fire and its power to burn. If you see the fire, you must recognize its power to burn also. You cannot think of fire without its power to burn, nor can you think of the power to burn without fire. You cannot conceive of the sun's rays without the sun, nor can you conceive of the sun without its rays. What is milk like? Oh, you say it's something white. Well, you cannot think of milk without thinking of the whiteness. And again, you cannot think of whiteness without the milk. Thus, one cannot think of Brahman without Shakti, or of Shakti without Brahman. One cannot think of the absolute without the relative, or of the relative without the absolute. And so he's careful to point out here that even though we draw this separation in our training period, where we are not all of this, he's saying in the end, you're going to get to the roof and realize that the roof is made of the same material as the steps were on your way up there. That's a knowledge. That's what you tie in the corner of your dhoti. After samadhi, that becomes reality. That doesn't become an experience of reality, because there's no experiencer. So it's that thing to keep in mind. And why do we keep it in mind? Well, many reasons, but certainly one helpful reason is it keeps us from being fanatic. If you love God, it's easy to be fanatical about the God that you love, because it's different from other people's gods, because we all have our own idea. And so we begin to think we're special. We begin to think that I'm right. And we begin to think, no, God isn't like that. He's like this, or she's like this, or it is like this. But if you keep that underlying knowledge that everything is one without a second, that eliminates that problem. You won't get into that fundamentalist trap of mixing ego with religion, mixing your separateness with the truth of your religion. So he tells us to be careful of this and to know that they cannot be separated. The primordial power is ever at play. That's a wonderful way to put it. When you can actually separate your ego self out, when you can separate the body as just a temporary manifestation in this moment of you. You are the milk, and your body mind are the whiteness. You know, they're inseparable for you, and yet there is a unity underlying in them, right? Ultimately, there is a unity there of all things, but it's not just a unity with you and your body mind. It's a unity with you, your body mind, and everything that's in it. So it's an understanding that I'm not a particular in this scene. I am the scene itself. And what is the scene itself? It's my play. It's my play. There may be things going on in this play that hurt my body, but the body's not me. I'm unconcerned. There may be things in this play going on that hurt my mind. I'm unconcerned because I'm not my mind. So you maintain that separateness and that understanding of the world, and you can watch the drama on the movie screen. You can watch life on the movie screen and not be pulled into it. If you want to be pulled in for a while, you get pulled in for a while. When you've learned to control yourself, when you've learned your nature, you can play that way, just like Thakur. He could go up and down the spiritual spectrum. You know, he could wail in sadness at someone's death, and a few minutes later rise above it and laugh at the whole idea of death itself, this impossibility. So it's that knowing. And this is what Ramakrishna is trying to say. So this primordial power, it's ever at play. She is creating and preserving and destroying in play, as it were. This power is called Kali. Kali is verily Brahman, and Brahman is verily Kali. So again, he's emphasizing that understanding. You may have a specific idea of God. Kali is a specific idea of God. It's a named idea and build that relationship. But understand that this infinite, undefinable, immortal God is Shakti, or is Kali rather, and Kali is that indivisible God. So Kali is not the only manifestation. It's not the only thing that is God. God has become all of these things. And so that will allow you to go into anybody's church, anybody's temple, and feel the beautiful spiritual energy of the love that is the center of every religion and every temple. You can see the name, and Sri Ramakrishna could be sitting there, Jesus could be up there, Mary could be up there, Shiva could be up there, Rama could be up there, nothing could be up there. And you would be able to sit in here and say, yes, that too is the play of the beloved. Yes, that too is a symbol of this infinite God, of which all of us are a part, of which all of us are a play, a story of the love that is God, weaving through this world of play. That your ego is only that. It's the story of your love as you've walked through God. The primordial power is ever at play. She's creating, preserving, destroying in play. This power is called Kali. It is one and the same reality. When we think of it as inactive, that is to say, not engaged in the acts of creation, preservation, and destruction, then we call it Brahman. Yes, but when it engages in those activities, then we call it Kali or Shakti. The reality is one and the same. The difference is in name and form. It is like water, called in different languages by different names, such as Jal or Pani and so forth. There are three or four ghats on the lake. A ghat is a dock or an access place to the lake. The Hindus who drink water at one place will call it Jal. The Muslim at another place will call it Pani, and the English at a third place will call it water. All three denote one and the same thing, the difference being in name only. In the same way, some address the reality as Allah, some as God, some as Brahman, some as Kali, and others by such names as Rama or Jesus or Durga or Hari. Keshab with a smile. Describe to us, sir, in how many ways Kali, the Divine Mother, sports in this world. The Master with a smile. he loves this question. He's all excited because he loves Mother Kali, and he's like, oh, she plays in different ways. It is she alone who is known as Mahakali, Nitya Kali, Smasana Kali, Raksha Kali, and Shyama Kali. Mahakali and Nitya Kali are mentioned in the Tantra philosophy. When there were neither the creation nor the sun, the moon, the planets, and the earth, and when darkness was enveloped in darkness, then the Mother, the formless one, Mahakali, the great power, was one with Mahakali, the absolute. Shyama Kali has a somewhat tender aspect and is worshipped in the Hindu households. She is the dispenser of boons and blessings and the dispeller of fear. People who worship Raksha Kali, the protectress, in times of epidemic or famine, earthquake, drought, and flood. Smasana Kali is the embodiment of the power of destruction. She resides in the cremation grounds, surrounded by corpses, jackals, and terrible female spirits. From her mouth flows a stream of blood. From her neck hangs a garland of human heads, and around her waist is a girdle made of human hands. This took me so long to understand, this idea of the unity of God in that ultimate reality, where it's not indivisible, that good and evil is just a seeming, right and wrong is just a seeming. It's a perspective when measured by ideas of ourself. If we take on this set of attributes for me, for I, then this set of things are going to be wrong, or going to seem evil, or going to seem harmful, or going to seem destructive. If we take on a different set of attributes for our sense of I, they're going to seem very different. A different set of things is going to be right and wrong, beneficial or harmful. So it's this idea of self that needs to grow. It's not the reality of the division or the pairs of opposites that needs to be maintained. That will go away. That will fall away as you understand yourself in your truest nature, in the nature that only incidentally has a body and a mind and an age at this moment. You've one sign of the things being unreal. Ramakrishna says, if you want to know if something about yourself is true or not, ask if it changes. If it changes, then it's not your true self. If it's not changing, then it's true. It's the true self. So always go back to that when you want to know who you are. Ask yourself, am I basing this idea of me on things that have changed? Or have I based this idea of me on something that doesn't change? And finding those things in you that don't change is one of the tasks or one of the manifestations of meditation, of sitting in that quiet, sitting there with a free mind, letting things unfold, letting the divine show you in that company what he is like, what she is like. So all the ways that God plays, that Kali plays, and all of the destruction, the wars and whatnot, all of those are as much God and are as much beautiful as the sun sets over the Santa Barbara Bay in the evening. That to the seer, to the knower, there's no distinction. There's an understanding that this is a manifestation of the play of the beloved. In the ultimate sense, this is a hard teaching because I'm not there. I suspect most of us aren't there. We can't see that unity. So it's hard for us to choke down that idea that nobody's being hurt, that nothing's being lost. We can do it at a movie. We can go to a movie for an hour and a half, and we can sit there and not jump up and down at the injustice of the murder that just happened on the screen. Because ultimately, in the back of our mind, we've tied in our dhoti the knowledge that this is just a movie. It's just a flash of color on the screen. So we don't get drawn into that degree where we feel like after the movie we have to go hunt down that actor and seek out our revenge. Be careful, because that's the nature of this world. Know at the same time, as you see all of this atrocity, all of this beauty, all of this wonder, frame it in the understanding that this is the play of the divine. Nobody's being hurt. It's one without a second. Now, that's not to say that you won't do anything, because you've got a nature. Your nature is love. Your nature is intelligence. So that will manifest through your individuality, through this idea, your role in this imaginary play, this play of the divine. and you won't have to sit and plan what you will have to do. The pure mind always responds perfectly in the moment. It's the impure mind, the mind full of me and mine, that won't respond properly. So hold on to that. Take peace in that. Don't withdraw from the world and let it all go to pot and think I have no role in it, but withdraw from the world knowing that it's the play of God, and then play your part in the world without attachment, without that ego investment, without that identity. I'm the helper, I'm the doer, I'm the fixer. No, you're the actor playing his part and doing it well, even though it's just a part, even though it's just a play. After the destruction of the universe, at the end of a great cycle, the Divine Mother garners the seeds for the next creation. She is like the elderly mistress of the house who has a hodgepodge pot in which she keeps all the different articles for her household. She's got the junk drawer in the kitchen. That's what it was in my house. It wasn't a hodgepodge pot, but it was the junk drawer in the kitchen. If you didn't know where something went, it went in the junk drawer. So it's all in there. So the mother does that. At the end of this universe, she takes up all the pieces, puts them in the junk drawer, closes the junk drawer, and when it's time again to pull out the play, opens it up, empties it on the kitchen table. Off we go, all over again. Oh yes, housewives have pots like that, where they keep sea foam, blue pills, small bundles of seeds of cucumber, pumpkin, and gourd, and so on. They take them out when they want them. In the same way, after the destruction of the universe, my Divine Mother, the embodiment of Brahman, the embodiment of that unchanging, immortal self that all of us are, in essence, all of us, that's that whole idea of the macrocosm and the microcosm being the same. We are a fractal of God. That image of God within us is the exact same relationship in that, between the power of God and the isness of God. So it says here, after the creation, man gathers the seeds for the next creation. After creation of the primal power dwells in the universe itself. She brings forth this phenomenal world and then pervades it. In the Vedas, creation is likened to the spider and its web. The spider brings the web out of itself and then remains in it. God is the container of the universe, and also what is contained in it. Now, this is a marvelous practice for meditation. Vivekananda made that amazing statement one time. He was in the city of Alameda in the Bay Area, and he made the statement, I am not in Alameda. Alameda is in me. So it's that seeing from that universal perspective. It's that knowledge of the dream, right? If you take yourself as being the body, mind in the dream, you're in the dream, and you're suffering all of its consequences in that moment. But if you are in that dream and you know yourself to be the sleeper, the dreamer, then you understand a very different thing about that dream. You understand that that dream is within you, and that it is all you. There are no people in there. There are no mountains. There are no anythings in there. It is all you within your own self, and the game and the dream goes on. So it's this knowing that this is that experience, that yes, God is everywhere present, but he's also the one watching that presence. God is, in fact, everywhere, one without a second. Is Kali, my Divine Mother, of black complexion? She appears black because she is viewed from a distance, but when intimately known, she is no longer so. The sky appears blue at a distance, but look at it close by. You'll find that it has no color. The water of the ocean looks blue at a distance, but when you go near and take it in your hand, you find that it is colorless. So he's pointing at a very important thing here in the fact that we will experience God or experience this world, experience life, based on our intimacy with the reality of what it is. That it, at the beginning, will seem absolutely separate from you. it will see there is good and evil. There is good, there is evil, there is right, there is wrong, there is male and female, there's and all in between. And this is my relationship, you know. I'm a straight person, I see the world this way. I'm a gay person, I see it this way. I'm a black person, I see it this way. These things are going to be real to the degree that you believe yourself to be the body and mind, to the degree that you've defined yourself by changing things, to the degree that you're able to define yourself by the unchanging self, the unchanging inside. To that degree, there's no black and white people, there's no gay and straight people, there are people. And those people, the image looking out of their eyes, that listener listening to their ears, is the same one that's in me. And if I establish that intimate relationship with that self within me, I'm automatically intimate with the self within you. And that's how a holy person can look at you and you can know their love for you. That's how a Jesus can look at you and change your life. How a Buddha can look at you and remove karma, you know, in an instant. Because you will know that gaze, having never seen it before, because it will bring to the forefront the truth of what you are. It will make obvious something to you that may not be apparent. The master became intoxicated with... We're only going for half an hour? We're going on for 3 days. I'm going to read one more section here. The master became intoxicated with divine love and sang. See, how can we stop before that? We have to go here. Is Kali, my mother, really black? The naked one of blackest hue lights the lotus of the heart. The master continued, bondage and liberation are both of her making. By her Maya, worldly people become entangled in woman and gold, and again, through her grace, they attain their liberation. She is called the Savior and the remover of the bondage that binds one to the world. Then the master sang the following song in his melodious voice. In the world's busy marketplace, O Shyama, thou art flying kites. High up they soar in the wind of hope, held fast by Maya's string. Their frames are human skeletons, their sails of the three gunas made. But all their curious workmanship is merely for ornament. Upon the kite strings you have rubbed the manja paste of worldliness, so as to make each straining strand all the more sharp and strong. Out of 100,000 kites, at best, but 1 or 2 break free, and you laugh and clap your hands, O mother, watching them. On favoring winds, says Ramprasad, the kites are set loose, will speedily be borne away to the infinite, across the sea of the world. So this wonderful, wonderful illustration of what life is. You are that kite being flown by the divine. You're bound to the world by a string. And that manja paste, the flying kites in India is a little different. Here, we just fly it for the sake of having the kite in the sky. But in India, they actually, the goal is to sever the string of your competitor's kites. So all the kites will be flying, and they'll sometimes will put like some sort of either sand or a glass, fine glass material. We'll put it on the string itself, so that when it rubs on another kite string, it will cut the kite string to give them the advantage in the play. So that's that manja paste that he's talking about here, the manja paste of the world. It's a glue of barley and broken glass, according to the scripture here. So you're playing your kites and bound to the world by the ideas of what? Lust and greed. To be unpleasant, that's the only thing that keeps this world going. That's also a very interesting contemplation. The master says the cause of all of this differentiation, the cause of all this world as it appears to us, is lust and greed. That it's based on your passions that you like or don't like, that you want or don't want, that you give or don't give, that it's your idea of yourself as a body which opens the world of the passions to you. It's because of lust that you notice whether someone's beautiful or ugly, Because of lust that you notice whether they're straight or gay or in between. It's because of lust that you look and see their wealth or their poverty, their chubbiness or their svelteness. All of these things because of lust. And then for greed, for the taking, what can I have? All of your friendships measured by that greed. Person doesn't return your calls 3 or 4 times in a row, well, just draw a little line through them in your contact book. It's finished. No more. They don't give to me. I don't give to them. I give money to a beggar. He responds in a way that's not appropriately thankful. Well, I'm not going to give him any more money. So it's this expectation. What am I getting? What am I getting? How can I get? How can I get? And this lust, this pleasures of the body. How do I get? How do I get? How do I get? From those 2 desires, those 2 fundamental things, all of this has come. All of it. So, find that unchanging self within. Be freed from these bondage of wrong thinking, of defining yourself by the changing world. Find that oasis of tranquility, that infinite, ever free, ever pure, ever blissful self, and dwell there. Establish yourself there by knowing the name of God and repeating it constantly, to sit in that divine presence, to gaze happily and joyfully at his face like they're gazing at the master in the boat as they go along, oblivious to the world of the changing as it goes by. Jai Ma, Jai Thakur, Jai Swamiji.